Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. Got returning champion Monty Anderson here with me today. Probably pushing the limits here as the most frequent guest on the show. But Monty, our friend and developer in South Dallas, options real estate, and many other ventures, neighborhood evolution, et cetera. Monty, it's good to see you again, man.
You too, Kevin. I'm always glad to come back. I love listening to your shows, so it's fun to be here.
Well, you are my target audience, so.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's great to see you. We were kind of communicating recently and just chatting about some stuff, and it just kind of felt like there's some stuff that we should just go ahead and get on a recording that I think are of interest. And we've had Monty on before, but we had a chance today to think about diving deeper into this subject about properties that are maybe what some people would consider obsolete. And from a development standpoint, thinking about how do you approach properties like this. So there's any number of things that you could think about. We talked about things like churches, golf courses, old strip malls. Monty, I think you are literally the only person who's ever made me think I should go buy an old strip mall. But some of the really
terrible.
cool, some of the really cool creative redevelopment things that you've done. But I think this is a really interesting topic. I've run across a lot of these sorts of properties in my career and seen people struggle and try things. And so, where do you want to start? What's on your mind?
Yeah. We could start with a golf course, a church, or a strip mall, because we're working on all three right now. And one, in fact, the golf course is up there in Grandview, Missouri, working with a couple of incremental developers up there, and that's an interesting one. I mean, it's an abandoned golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And what do? You got all these homes around a bunch of land, and now the weeds are growing, 4 feet high. And what do you do with it? What do you do with the old clubhouse? Is there any way to create a town center, a neighborhood center out of a golf course? And we think there is.
Yeah, and it's not unusual. There are a bunch of courses like this all over the country. I worked on one years ago in Independence, Missouri, that was, the older golf courses, which tended to be a little smaller than the modern golf courses. And some of them, basically it's like any other development thing. The development stampede maybe moved beyond what was a desirable location. The Grandview one's kind of interesting. I'm familiar with it. I haven't looked at it with you because it's not an undesirable location, but it is a golf course that basically has gone defunct, which happens. I mean, they go broke just like any other business.
Yeah, and it's not a real, I wouldn't call it a real upscale housing development around the golf course. It's a very middle income housing development. And so when the golf course went defunct, it was like, what do you do with all that? What do you do with all that land? It's cheap. You can buy it cheap. You get to buy the clubhouse and the big parking lot and the town, what I'd call the town center where the clubhouse is. And so, but what do you do with the rest of the land? You can't, some of it, you got zoning issues, lots of it, you've got utility issues, or it's in lots of golf courses are in floodplains.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? And so what we did was started on that one with the clubhouse, because it was an abandoned clubhouse. And what the idea was to make a small town around the downtown, if you will, around the clubhouse, to turn the clubhouse into an event center and a couple of Airbnbs or 3 Airbnbs, and then add on in the parking lot some small, retail stores that could be owner occupied, because the small developer that's doing this project was going to build and sell lots, or build and sell houses, build and sell buildings. So it was a perfect opportunity to take the street in front of the clubhouse and build on both sides of the street. Some townhomes, some small, we're talking retail, 600 to 1,000 square foot retail buildings, and to create a little main street, just a one block main street. And then to take the land that was easy enough that you could connect to that was green, that was part of the green of the golf course greens, and to start to build a few houses on those, a little more modern house, and it kind of connect, and always connecting up to the current neighborhood. And then it became just a matter of mowing the area around the trail. So you had this huge walking trail. So you got this really great walking path, through the whole golf course.
Yeah.
And then that's where we're at today, is that's as far. And then there's a lot of other ideas, like maybe you do a little 3-hole golf course, maybe you just do a driving
Yeah.
range. Maybe you do a small boutique hotel out there with maybe 20 or so rooms to go with the event center for weddings, things like that. Maybe you do horseback riding. Maybe you do farming. Maybe you farm some of that land. Maybe you turn some of the land back over to the state, parks and wildlife, or to the city parks and wildlife. So maybe you just let it grow back into forest. Maybe you reforest, the areas that are just not really buildable, at least right now, affordably. You may. And so we're starting at the center and incrementally move and see what the market and the land tells us. The land will begin to tell us things. And so we kind of look for those hints and then go from there. They're currently redoing the clubhouse and getting the first retail and a couple of homes started out there right now.
So I would think also one of the challenges with an old golf course is like a political challenge, in that the people who live around it, even though they didn't own it, even though the course was privately owned, they perceive that as like park space and green space that's theirs. And this was an issue, the one that I worked on years ago, where the adjoining neighbors were really, really upset at the idea that this former golf course might be developed as housing or anything. That just really kind of perceived it as their park space.
Yeah.
Is that an issue you had to deal with on this site?
Yes, that is an issue they are dealing with. Jorge and Mariana, I'd like to shout out to them, because they're these are two small scale developers up in your territory that are they just go for it. I mean, they're some of the bravest people I've ever met. Started off doing Airbnbs and houses, and really brave. A lot of courage for them to do what they're doing right now. But yeah, you had to deal with the homeowners, which the homeowners association was so old. Nobody's coming to the homeowners meetings. So it's like you got 2 or 3 people that are speaking for everyone else who did think that was their private park. And so I think, though, it's been bad enough, long enough, with weeds growing and nobody doing anything, that they're a little bit more workable now. And where the evolution of this course is, they're a little bit more workable, because at this point, anything sounds pretty good. And these small developers, these two here they're trustworthy. They're good. They're just nice people. They're good. They're ex-missionaries. They were missionaries, and then they came back. Now their work is doing real estate.
Real estate missionaries.
Missionary, yes, town making, as we like to call it, town making. But yeah, they're great. So that there is things that the homeowners association, there is actions that they do have to take. There is some, not a lot, but that's part of the political there. Not only that, and then the zoning, but they went through the city zoning and got that done. So the city is allowed to do what they want. They had very little resistance from the homeowners there. Again, it's like an old shopping center, an old abandoned church, or an abandoned mall, where sometimes when a city or the neighbors are so desperate, for anything to happen, it's actually a good time for an incremental developer to come along at that point, because you know, they've just been promised or thought about things and talked to politicians and things like that. Nothing's happened. And so for
Mhm.
somebody to come along and actually start doing something, at least just mowing the land,
Yeah.
which they did, which was a big deal for
And
them.
it's no
So
small expense on a
right,
project like
yeah.
that.
In fact,
So,
one of them, Jorge, he mows the land himself. I mean, it's a
geez,
lot of land. Yeah,
that's a lot of land.
yeah,
Is on a site like that or old golf course, would you think you would encounter environmental issues? I mean, a lot of golf courses use a lot of chemicals to keep the fairways and the greens attractive and
yeah.
everything.
Nothing came up on the environmental out there. So whatever you would think so, wouldn't you? I mean, you would
Hmm.
think fertilizers or whatever they're using, but nothing came up on that. But I
Good.
mean, I wouldn't buy one without doing some testing.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably, if I was going to buy one, I'd probably do some drilling. I'd probably do a phase two, not just a phase one environmental. I'd probably do a phase two
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see what was there. But no, on this one, nothing came up.
Yeah. And then, like to your point, there's kind of probably some interesting water and sewer concerns, just because you obviously you would have water and sewer to the clubhouse, but uh, that might be in a weird location or
Yeah,
a lot of utility to deal with.
yeah, typical of a developer of that time period of the '60s, or in that they just put barely enough sewer, you know, to get by. Just no plan
Mm.
for any future. I mean, no thought of ever that the golf course would never, would not be there. So there's no thought of that. So yeah, they've had to. There's some challenges on stormwater, you know, on sanitary sewer and water, um, possibly even electricity.
Mm.
Other utilities, gas and electric. Just barely enough to get by out there. So when you're starting on a project like this, the first things I would do would be environmental. You'd look at the environmental, and I would hire my civil engineers, to look at the capacity for water, sewer, and other utilities, and I would look at those things before I moved very far at all, but
Hmm.
really before I started. And then you could back into this land we can use, the clubhouse we can use, this land we can use, that land we can't use. We just can't use it. It's either in a floodplain, or there's no way to get utilities to it reasonably, financially reasonable or not. And so you would start with that. That's the same way you would start with a greenfield development. You'd start
Yeah.
with really what's underground, what it's going to take to get your infrastructure in the
Yeah.
same way, and also to respect, again, good developers like our friends are, you're and my friends. We want to respect the neighbors. We don't want to come in and overpower them with odd things on the earth.
Yeah.
But you always want to try to respect the neighbors in a
Yeah.
situation like that.
Have you seen any other examples that are anything like this, where an old golf course got repurposed?
No, I hadn't. And especially the kind of stuff I work in, whether it's churches, shopping centers, or golf courses, they're going to, generally speaking, be on a lower level. They're not going to typically be in the hot spots of future development. The stuff
Hmm.
that I don't know why I get stuck in working on things that's going to, you know, like we're too poor to tear it down ever, shopping center or something like that. Never, if it gets torn down, it'll never get built back, but anyway, yeah, uh, yeah, what was the question? What was the question on that?
No, just if you'd seen any other
Oh yeah,
examples or
no,
anything
I
like that.
haven't. I haven't really seen any, and I
Yeah.
know there's been some things. There's people talk about farming them, and again, back to the farming, is the soil any good?
Yeah.
What do you got to grow out there? But yeah, I haven't seen anything uh, in the golf course area that's worked. I thought about it a lot because one of my very first developments is I bought a golf course and redeveloped the housing around it.
Hmm.
So I bought one of my very first developments in the '90s was in DeSoto, Texas. It's called Thorn Tree Country Club, and I bought a golf course and put up. It's like the first guy ever put up any townhomes, small homes,
Hmm.
and we thought small was 1,400 square feet. And in Texas, you gotta remember where I'm from. In Texas, we thought 1,400 square foot was small, but so I knew a little bit about golf courses. I knew knew something about them. And typically they're bought, where there's land that's floodplain land and those kind of things. But I think there's got to be more and more of them come about, because it's just so expensive to keep them up, and if you don't have a new clubhouse and you don't have the latest state of the art, and because Tiger Woods doesn't play anymore, when Tiger
Yeah.
Woods was playing, golf went up,
Right.
like went up,
Right.
and then when he got older, then it seems like it went back down. So we need
Yeah,
a
it does.
new Tiger Woods is what we need,
I
or
think we
younger. Maybe his son will be the one.
maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
But yeah, it does seem like it was a sport that probably peaked a little while back, and
yeah,
we're probably overbuilt generally on golf courses. But
that's right. Yeah.
um, so I mean, that's a really interesting deal. I mean, I can think of lots of different ways that a project like that could be really cool, but it also could be really daunting to think about taking something like that on.
When you could think about things like, I know where there's places horseback riding for disabled children or
Hmm.
adults either, or therapy riding, or, is there other things that you can do like that would, because it make a great horseback riding,
Yeah,
trail too.
yeah,
It'd
sure.
make, is there soccer fields, you could put in, is there, or what are the other things that you could do that you need, today, pickleball courts, I don't know what, but usually cities have already got things, but especially if it was a golf course that's connected to a park, which this one's kind of connected to a park, and so it could add a trail on to a park. But the cities, generally these days, cities are not wanting to take on more parkland.
Right.
They're not wanting to. There's cost, and cities are not doing so well financially, and they're not wanting to take on any more land.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a guy I talked to recently who wanted to build a community around rugby fields and like a rugby complex,
Hmm.
which that was kind of a new one
Yeah,
that I'd heard about.
I like stuff like that. I think
Yeah.
that's fun if especially if it's something that's not too trendy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that's, especially like rugby, or something unique where it would
It's
bring in.
got a unique, community and,
Yeah,
potential buyer or renter or whatever would be
yeah,
attracted to it.
yeah,
So you've, I'm going to switch and talk about strip malls and old strip malls, just because I know
yeah,
you've done a bunch of this now. And I think last time I heard you present, you talked about how you're getting obsessed with these old strip malls.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How on earth did an urban developer like you get
Uh,
interested in like suburban style strip malls?
I don't know. It's like, one thing people always ask me is, where do you start? Where do you start? And I always say, you start with the opportunity. And then they'll say, well, what's the opportunity? I said, it's the next thing down the road that's cheap and ugly, and that's what you get, these strip malls. And especially the ones that are built in the, maybe again back in the 60s and the
Hmm.
70s, in those range, where they were built in the town, like the one I'm sitting in right here today is built across the street, City Hall, in a park, and there's a eighth grade school, and behind me there's an elementary school, and then there's residential all around it, but there's a 6-lane road out front, you know, so it's a strode, that's just, uh, you know, 60, 70 miles an hour, and but it's a U-shaped center. Within the middle of the U, it's connected to the neighborhood. So at that time, they didn't make them put a big concrete wall around,
Hmm.
the center. And because it's connected to the neighborhood, that's the reason I bought it. I mean, I'd been looking at it for a while. Plus, its location, it's right in the center of town, and it's really close to our main street where I've already been doing some development. And this is in Duncanville. And so, it's a 90,000 square foot center. It's got a Dollar General in it. It's got a, T-Mobile and a Domino's Pizza and a laundromat and a couple of cheap convenience stores that sold cigarettes and,
Hmm.
things like that. And a couple of tenants that didn't have COs, bad roof, light poles were falling, out of town owner, didn't have insurance on it. I mean,
Hmm.
it was pretty bad, full of asbestos, most of the sewers bad, but it had this big, giant parking lot right in the middle of the U. I mean, this big, giant parking lot right there. And we cut a square out of that big area and thought, if we put, multifamily or townhomes in that square, we could actually create a block. And then if we could get the city to downsize the 6-lane road, from 6 to 4 lanes, which we're way over. I mean, it's typical Strode in a first ring suburb. It's way over, built. I mean, probably, at least twice or 3 times overbuilt. So it could easily get rid of the, outside 2 lanes and either park on them. Parking may have made better sense, parallel parking.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build the townhomes in the middle of the shopping center, and it'd be like a cottage court of townhomes is what we
Yeah.
ended up with, like 16 townhomes. That we started out with 50 apartments. And then at this time in the market, I just didn't want to go in that kind of debt for 50 apartment units. I just didn't. And I decided that we wanted to do a for sale product, to out here, plat it out and do a for sale product. And it created a nice block, so we were taking this strip center, suburban strip center, and actually making it walkable. It had nice sidewalks in front of the stores and a nice overhang. So it had a lot of things you could do. And we're just rounding out our 3rd year, and we started at 50% occupancy, and we went down to 28%, down to 28, getting bad tenants out. And today we're 98% leased.
Oh, wow.
And we haven't built the townhomes yet, but we're getting ready to. We're getting ready to start. We have all the zoning. We have everything. And we cut it up. We have, I would say it like this. Main streets are normally 20% or so retail. And then the rest are office, government, healthcare, personal services. And these strip centers were all built to be retail sales, right? Consumer oriented, consumption oriented. And that's gone. And so if you think of a retail shopping center like this, especially in a good location, think about rebuilding Main Street. So in this one here, I just give you a few. We do have a Dollar General and a T-Mobile and a Domino's Pizza. I'm not running them off, okay, because they did help me get my financing. But we also put in a WellMed medical facility. We're just getting ready to open up the Department of Motor Vehicles, is putting a license plate, new car license plates. You can purchase them here. We'll have about 6 little restaurants. The biggest one's like 1,500 square foot diner. They're all little small, 600, 800 square foot, small, mostly to go restaurants. We've got an art studio, tattoo studio. We got a liberal arts training center. We got a karate studio. We got a daycare. We've got an after school program. We've got my offices and co-working. A guy makes pralines. We still got the laundromat, kept the laundromat. It is a very working class neighborhood. It needed the laundromat. It wouldn't be something I would probably put in if I was doing, something new. It's got a legendary barber shop that's just a huge amount of barbers. Been here forever. Legendary. Just they kind of have the vibe of the neighborhood here. They're great tenants. So we've got a pet store. So we got, it's like Main Street. Yeah. And you put the townhomes in the middle for sell townhomes, and then connected to the neighborhood behind it. You've really got Main Street. You've really helped rebuild Main Street the best you can. And so it's already won a major award here with the Greater Dallas Planning Council for, innovative design and of really reusing these things. And the thing is, it's an old center that you would say, well, why didn't you just tear it down? Yeah. Maybe some of our urbanist friends would say this,
sure.
this.
Yeah.
They say, just tear it down and get rid of it. Well, in this city here, it's not the most affluent. Being in South Dallas is the have-not side of Dallas, and the north is the haves. In this kind of a center here, it wouldn't get torn down for many, many years. It would just continue to be a low-end, slumlord operated, strip center. It'd probably have smoke shops, vape shop, check cashing, dollar stores, and it would continue to just get worse and worse and worse. And in this case, you had to keep the building. we just had to figure out how to keep the building. So, and is in our tradition that we started cutting up the spaces. Like we took a long space that was 1,400 square feet, and we made the front space shallow and like 800 feet, so I could get $20 a foot. So at 1,400 square foot, I could only get $12 a foot. When I cut it back to 800, I can get 20. And then I created a loft apart or a flat out the back. So there's actually
Hmm.
living spaces out the back end in the alley of it. And they're kind of cool. They're just it's kind of like it's kind of cool going in the back, we keep them clean. But you go in the back and here's this, person living in the back alley of a shopping center. And
Right.
we
That
don't have
keeps
very many of those. We have a few.
but that also helps keep some eyes on the property when the businesses are closed too, which is kind of
Eyes,
cool.
eyes on the street. We don't have people dumping.
Yeah.
We don't have crime here. We have a few homeless stir in and out, but
Yeah.
it really is limited, all of that. And so then we did co-working,
Uh-huh.
next to our office, connected with our office. And that's done real well so far. We've been here about 5 or 6 months now. And so cutting up these spaces, we're able to take a shopping center we overpaid for. We paid $6 million for it, and it was on the tax rolls for $3 million. And when we get through and currently it just appraised for $20 million, because I
Hmm.
just refinanced it. It just appraised for $20 million. And when we get the 16 townhomes in, you'll have about another $5 or $6 million. So you'll go from $3 million to $25 million on the tax rolls with no new infrastructure, with the city, and no, just it just makes the city rich. This kind of project makes the city rich,
Right. Right.
and
So
so
what besides cutting things up into smaller spaces, what else did you have to do to make it attractive to decent tenants?
well, um, besides replacing the roofs,
Yeah.
getting some sewer, and all of those things, we took a bunch of old stucco off the building. We kind of made it look like it was when it was new. And then we had a big strip of land right on the strode on the front of the building. It was a huge strip of concrete asphalt mixture up there. And we made a green belt on the front of the strip center across. It's about 35, 40 feet wide. And so it's got this huge green. I mean, it's not perfectly urban. Okay. It's by no
Right.
means perfect urbanism. If you're wanting to do perfect urbanism, this is not the place. It's kind of doing the best, but we have this big green belt with trees, and really changed the looks, of inside that green belt, that 30 feet wide green belt. On the outside of that is like a 8 foot sidewalk, and then that 8 foot sidewalk is next to the sixth lane, the outside lanes of a 6 lane road. And so if we could get some parallel parking out there, or either bike lanes on that 6 lane, it's going to start to you start to urbanize, this. And then we put some food trailers, which we do in every project that we do. We're always going to have food trailers out in the parking lot, and those didn't go out on the Strode. Those went out on another spot that made it more urban. But those are really good. The trailers are really good for the beginning stages of getting attention and twinkly lights. We always put a trailer out in twinkly lights, and we got a barbecue place and a taco place. Both are doing really good. I won't probably put a whole bunch of them here, just a couple here and there. But those are the other things. Painting, just painting it up. Coming up with, I use graphic designers now. I don't try to do this myself, and architects. I use really for the new signage package. So clean signage, and really, really just basic things. I mean, it's really just cleaning, going in, opening up ceilings, no more drop ceilings, more 2x4 drop ceilings. When we did the roof, we put the insulation on top of the roof. We used the TPO, which is
Yeah.
that white
Uh-huh.
rubber. We
Right.
put the insulation on top so we could leave the open ceilings, with polished concrete floors, lots of metal, and black painted wood. I mean, kind of when you walk in to my office or the new artist studio, it's just people walk in, they just go, wow, I can't believe this. This is like, I had no idea I was coming into something, like this.
Yeah.
The
So
daycare out back, we cut up
yeah.
all the concrete in the back. We put a daycare in. We got this beautiful daycare yard. I mean, it's one of the best I've
Huh.
ever seen, especially in this end of town. We cut a bunch of concrete up, so we have real grass. We have some fake grass. We have some rubber, some of that rubber that you'll see in daycares. That rubber
Yeah, sure.
surface in the fenced area, and then outside the fenced area is trees in like a garden, like a big area where we cut up the concrete. And we cut the concrete. Just putting that grass and the trees in that concrete area, you can't believe just putting grass and trees in a concrete area that's not used for parking anymore will make a huge difference in these shopping centers. Just that one thing will make a
Mhm.
huge difference.
So I know you've done this strategy before in Duncanville where especially where you take like larger spaces and you make them into smaller spaces, and you've had a lot of success with finding businesses to do that. But here you are kind of thinking like you're working in the same community. Do you feel like there's like more and more demand? Do you ever worry about like cannibalizing your other projects or other spaces? I just think it like a market research person would probably tell you, well, there's only really a market for, 20 of these businesses,
Yeah.
but you seem to keep finding them.
Well, and that's right too. That's why the Department of Motor Vehicles. This is 90,000 square feet. So the Department of Motor Vehicles took some of the space I couldn't cut up. They took 7,500 square feet. Huge win. State of Texas lease, 10 years. Somebody said at the city, well, why would you do that? Why would you? Well, there's 100 people a day that come in that office.
Mm-hmm.
100 people. So they come in, they're going to buy lunch here. WellMed, the medical, they have 10,000 feet. They have 10,000, so it's not a matter, you can't just go around. You got to understand, you're doing surgery here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you can't just go in and cut everything up, cut everything open. You got to understand where you got it, where you can do it, where you can get away with it. I'm evolving even in that, even my small restaurants that I did in other places where I created more of a food court. I didn't like the food court because somebody had to clean the tables.
Mm.
And that somebody ends up being me, the landlord, because the tenants didn't really clean the tables. And I
Yeah.
didn't want another food court. So in this case, the little restaurants, although they're small, they all have outside entries. And then they share the grease trap. They share restrooms out of back hall. They share restrooms. And so I don't have to clean up common areas anymore for them. So you can cut those up. They're right next door to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then Dollar General's in the 8,000 feet, the karate studio's in 4,000 feet, the daycare's in 4,000 feet, the after school program's like 3,500 square feet, the tattoo studio, art studio's in like 2,500 square feet, and then the artist that rented that, he subleases space like a hair salon to other studio
Mm-hmm.
operators where I don't have to do, I'm not renting booths, like
Right.
I'm not renting. I'm learning how to make my management better. And again, you can't just come in and cut everything open like that. You got to be strategic about where you put those things. And that's going to be different from location to location. You just can't copy this work. You can't just go, okay, well, Monty did it in Duncanville. Now we can do it in Kansas City. And,
Right.
you got to look at the context and what's around it, and, who you have, who is your market, what is your demographic, do you have people that can actually walk and come to work here? Do you have a lot of side hustlers here? Who are your people? You got to know. In our step 2 in the 12 steps of town making, it's about getting to know your neighbors. It's like you got to know who your people are,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
it's like anything else. You got to calibrate it, right? You got to calibrate
Right.
it to the local conditions. Yeah, you can't. This is not like a franchise and one size fits
Yeah.
all. You got to really be careful with it. You can mess it up.
Yeah. So doing this one, does it have you looking at or thinking about other similar kinds of projects?
Yeah, it does. Everything. I've got an office building. I've got a 4-story glass office building in another suburb called Lancaster over here. And it's a glass office building built in the 80s. It's single pane glass. Okay. It's when you stand on the southwest side of the building in August in Texas, you'll burn, it'll burn you. If you touch the glass, it'll burn you. It's that bad. It's really bad. I mean, it's not the building you want. Besides the work we're doing on the office building to try to make it sustainable with new glass and some new film and some new air conditioning. We're doing some stuff. I'll just leave it at that. We're doing stuff to the office building to make it better. It's still a single use. It's still a single use project that is less desired today because offices are now, offices are as big as the cell phone. I mean, that's as big as your office needs to be, these days. So it's got a big concrete front parking lot, and out in the front parking lot, we've taken all the parking out, and we're currently working on it right now. We're putting in 2 400 square foot food kiosks and a big shade structure and a park. So in the middle of this big, ugly suburban parking lot, you've got kiosks. And as soon as the frames went up on those things, I had people calling me like crazy. I mean, I got 2 of the best entrepreneurs coming in, 2 restaurateurs that you can't. I mean, it was it's right up. We put the buildings up close to the street, even though it's a suburban context. They look good in front of the building. It's made the building feel better. It starts to feel like even though it's an isolated property, it's still got some mix of uses. And then in the back of the building, behind it, way over parked and extra land, we got it zoned to put in 30 work-live, apartments. And so when we get through, we'll have it's a 44,000 square foot, 4-story building with 2 400 square foot retail kiosks in the front and 30 work-live apartments in the back. So we'll have our own little ecosystem, our own. And then across the street's a Sonic hamburger place, and there's a gas station down the road and a movie theater over a suburban, movie theater. And but you just can't hardly walk to them because it's a bad suburban neighborhood. So that's one that we're working on right now. And then the churches are coming up, like, and my partner, Bernice Radel, which in New York, in Buffalo, New York, she's got like 20 churches, Catholic churches have been dumped on her. I mean, and they're empty, and what do you do with these? And so I'm learning with the churches. I did one over here. I took a church on Main Street with it had the fellowship hall next to it. It had the sanctuary and the fellowship. It was kind of spread out along the road. So in the beginning, I bought it and we moved the church out. Well, the church was going out of business, so we bought it. And then we cut up the fellowship hall into like anywhere from 500 to 1,500 square foot spaces. We got a donut shop, an esthetician, a dog bathing place, a spin class, a hair salon. We always have to have a hair salon and everything. We got a tax office, and they're all in. We cut holes in the walls, so we made these storefronts. And then we put in a dance studio in the sanctuary, and they stayed there for a few years, and then they went out of business. And then we put in a lighting store, and they stayed there for a few years, and they went out of business. And then the city turned down a barber school I was trying to put in there. They turned down a barber school. They said, we don't want any more barbers on Main Street. We want something else. So I said, and a barber school had to have a specific use permit. And so I said, well, I'll show you. I'll just put a church back in there. So I found a church that had a really good, it's kind of an accident, but it really was kind of serendipitous. But the church had a really good music program, and they're there at night a lot of times. And the church came in, and it's done unbelievably beautiful. I mean, it's been, the parking flows back and forth. They hang out at night when they're singing. It's not a bar, but they're hanging out, at night on the sidewalk, all these musicians and stuff. And so one thing I've learned is leaving, and I think this is what I'm supposed to do. This is at least what my faith, requires me to. is requiring me to do is these churches need to stay in these places. They may not need to own them anymore.
Hmm.
And also they're back on the tax rolls now. So it's,
Hmm.
it's on the tax rolls.
Yeah, interesting.
And so the church gets to stay, and we're going to put all these other uses with it. Now, I'm not the first to do this. I'm not the first to do any of this stuff really, but I think it's really a new model of churches that we can have. Maybe three churches can use a sanctuary in one building, and we can use some of these buildings 7 days a week instead of just one or two. And
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. It works really. It's a beautiful building too. We redid some of it and just redid the signage on it. And it's turned out to be really good, and it's very profitable right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen, if you're in any kind of an old city, you've probably seen a lot of older Catholic or mainline Protestant churches that just really declining and declining and declining, and the amount of people who are attending, quite a few of them closing. Um, my brother, we used to talk about this years ago. He lived in an old neighborhood in St. Louis that had a ton of just amazing, amazing old Catholic churches that, there really was no congregation for anymore. And so and the diocese would sell some or would look to sell
Mm-hmm.
some, but it's really hard to figure out who's going to buy it and for what. I mean, I've seen some clever reuses in other places. I saw one as a food hall. I've seen one as a brewery. Went to one in Ireland that got converted into a bar and restaurant. That was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's something to the fact that churches are changing as well. And it might be the answers for a different ownership structure and a different kind of church that occupies it versus what maybe some of the older mainline denominations.
Yeah, it is. And the ownership thing is really interesting because I'm working on one right now that I'm about to close a deal on. But there's a church north of me in Oak Cliff, an area in South Dallas, and they're basically going out of business. And somebody said, "Monty, will you see if you can help them?" So they've got a church with sanctuary. It's got a sanctuary and a fellowship hall, and it's got a gym in the back, and it's got a bunch of classrooms, 2-story classrooms. None of the classrooms are being used. Sanctuaries can't be used because the roof's no good and the air conditioning's bad, and they can't afford to fix it. And they're not property managers. And the church has changed demographically over the years from a white church to mostly Hispanic church now. So it's got older white people there and young Hispanics, but they've only got about 50 people there, and so they're fixing to just sell the church and go down the road with somebody else. And so I said, why did you do this? Why don't we form an LLC together, a for-profit and a nonprofit together, and you put your church into the LLC, and then I'll go get the loan. I'll go get the loan to fix the church up. The church will lease from the LLC one or two, slots that you need to use it. We'll use it for events, for weddings, and all the stuff that churches, funerals, whatever. We'll lease out the classrooms. They're already kind of perfect, and we'll lease out the classrooms for studios, for music studios, podcast studios, art studios, offices. And then we found somebody to lease the gym, like a camp, a basketball camp to lease the gym. And thing's going to turn out like really well, and it'll go back on the tax rolls because it's no longer profit. It's a for-profit
Mm-hmm.
now, so it'll go back on the tax rolls. But there's so much money and income from the church, and it's actually pretty easy to do because the classrooms are already divided up where you can actually use them the way they are. And so it needs the asbestos taken out of it. It needs the air conditioning done. It needs the roof done, and it needs a property manager, which I'll be the
Yeah.
property manager. So if they sold the building, they would get nothing. There's nobody that gets the money. They have to give it away. They have to give it away. In this case, my pitch to them was 50% of something great is better than 100% of nothing. And they said, we agree. And so we have a LLC put together. In fact, I'd always share it with you or with anybody because I said, I want to protect the church. I want to protect them from me. I want to protect them from the developer. I want them to be able to survive in case I go crazy or I die or whatever. That they have a place where they get protected with the next, my estate or whoever comes in. And so you think about it. So I'm getting in for nothing. All I got to do is get a loan. They're putting up all the equity.
Hmm.
And I think this is a new model. This is really a new model, and that could really be big all over. And there could be 2 or 3 churches in there because the churches are no longer as big as they used to be.
Right.
But they have all these other occupants in the building that they could minister to. So they have an opportunity to be involved in the community more in ministry. And at the same time, the community's got, again, small places. It's right in the middle of a neighborhood. It's beautiful old building. And I mean, and then churches with land, with extra land. And this is, Bernice and I have worked on, 2 of these churches in Lafayette that are now doing this work. 2 of them, and then she's working on some in Buffalo, and we're becoming these church experts,
Mm.
and figuring out what to do with them. And again, you can't there's no 2 that are the same, and especially if some's got extra land. Say a church has got extra land, they could build maybe the cottage community could be for the Down syndrome children who have grown into adults that their parents have died, or mentally disabled or challenged, challenged part of our society, or homeless, or single moms, or the elderly, or whatever the case may be, which is what the church is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It's really, and maybe the answers for some of those things, some of our societal, problems, maybe they should be back in the church. Maybe back with the church. Maybe guys like you and I can partner with them and help them with these kind of things that could house and put people in a more humane situations, and
Hmm.
better conditions, and at the same time preserve the church. And
Yeah, I like what you're talking about. Like a lot of churches are, they don't know how to manage property,
mm-mm,
and they're kind of unwitting owners because they think they have to own.
yeah,
And it's probably easier, frankly, to raise money to buy something or to build something than for ongoing stuff. But it would be better off if you could take them out of the property management business and help them just focus on their mission, their
yeah,
primary mission. Uh, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is I think about schools the same way.
school, yeah,
I'm in a district with declining enrollment, as a lot of urban districts are, and so the public school district has just dozens of buildings that are vacant or underutilized,
yeah,
and they've gradually sold some over the years. They've got others they really should sell, but it kind of makes let's be honest, schools are often lousy property managers,
yes,
uh, and it would be interesting to think about schools instead of them wanting to own the property to be a tenant with the developer who knows how to own property and manage it, and let the school focused on the educational mission
yeah,
instead.
yeah. I think you're exactly. Imagine this for a minute. It'd probably have to be a charter type school, or a business. Let's just say it's a business school that is mixed in with co-working and small entrepreneurs, and the school's still there. See, this is what I've learned with my church on Main Street over here. I've owned this church for like 20 years now, 15, 20, and it struggled along until I put the church back in it. It was like, really, it's like a God thing or something, so I put the church back in it, and it started to thrive. It was like,
Hmm.
and the parking, we had, it's parking challenged, so it solved my parking problem of putting in a user that would have used up parking. But I think you're right with the schools. We're across the street from an 8th grade center over here, and our co-working space out here, when we were in the beginning, when nobody was here, we wanted to fill it up. We wanted people coming in here and hanging around. We didn't care if you even paid; just come in and hang around, have a cup of coffee or some hot chocolate or whatever. So we got these 8th graders; they're all walking by here every day. We said, "Hey, come on in, come on in and hang out. Here's Wi-Fi, here's some coffee, here's some donuts, here's
Mm-hmm.
things
Yeah.
over here." First, they thought we're some old creepy man, creepy, creepy. We had to be careful or
Yeah,
not.
that sounds like the beginning to a bad story.
No,
So,
it's not. It's not. So there's plenty of people around. But anyway, they came in, and they these 8th graders are a little awkward anyway, right? An 8th grader's kind of in that, and so mostly girls that are coming in over here, and they come in every day now, and they hang out back here. and they miss if we didn't get the donuts one day on time. They wanted to know where the and they have hot chocolate. They talk to us. They talk to business people here. They it's really a good mix. It's like when they first came in, they were real shy. I mean, they were real shy. They didn't. We talk about what do you want to do when you get out of school? Do you want to, they want to be nurses or they want to be, and they just talk to people. They talk to our receptionist, which is the concierge of the co-working up here. She's actually an ex-school teacher, and
Hmm.
she's around them, and but I think mixing eighth graders and up, and mixing kids. I mean, I have the daycare next door, 2 to 5 year olds. The after school is six to 12 year olds, and then we have eighth graders after school. I mean, I think it's one of the best things we've ever done, and it was accident. Partly, we're trying to make enough money to make this thing work. Secondly, I got to realizing how important these kids were to be mixed with into a community, into a main street. It's like Opie on the old Andy Griffith show. It's like walking down Main Street. I mean, these girls here that are coming in here, they all know them now. Nobody's got to bother
Mhm.
them. They're not going to get bothered. And it really it's one of the best things. It gives me really a lot of hope when I see them coming in here versus when we bought this center, the Dollar General store across the street had a sign on the door that said no one under 18 in here without a parent.
Hmm.
They didn't let them come in. They wouldn't let them come in to buy a cold drink or anything because they were, they saw them as a bunch of thieves and stuff. That's the way they viewed these kids. And I viewed these kids as the people we're building buildings for. They're the people we should be asking, what to do. And I think you're onto something there with schools and daycares and, what we do in the future, how we evolve in our education in this country and how we get people more, um, more used to dealing with talking with people, just socially
Yeah.
integrating, especially these days when it's lack of that social,
Yeah.
with all the devices we have to be
Yeah. No doubt.
non-social.
I mean, it's also a good situation for the parents, right? Because
Yeah,
so if the parents coming to pick up the daycare kids, well, maybe if they have a cool place where they can run into other parents
oh,
and hang out, they can grab a cup of coffee or a sandwich or something, or before or after, pick up, drop off. The same thing with older kids, and it just creates more of that opportunity for people to get to know each other.
yeah. And you're so right. And every bit of this, of course, you and I and our new urbanism beliefs, but every bit of this it's the same as building community. I mean, this is not something we invented. This
Right.
is since the beginning of time where people were mixed together of different ages and different incomes, and they were mixed together, and how we actually created community. And I feel lucky we kind of stumbled into some of this. Really, just I could never have designed how unbelievably great I think Wheatland Plaza. It's called Wheatland Plaza. Is I could have never designed that because I would have never designed Dollar General into a space.
Hmm.
Okay, I would have never designed the state of Texas into a space. They just weren't cool enough, right? They were, but they're so necessary, especially in a part of town in so many cities where you're not in an affluent area. Like I hear some of these mall developers that took 20 years to to redo a mall, but it was in a very affluent area where they could spend 400 million, or
Yeah.
something. We're talking about spending, you know, 15 million, 12 million, I mean, talking about doing something in, so many of these places around the country where there's just not enough money to do, have a $400 million project. The city here couldn't even do that. They couldn't do it. And it's amazing what's happening here. I just have to pinch myself really because it's performing now. It's took 3 years from start to finish to start to get the building list up. Took 3 years. It'll take another year to do the townhomes, and we're actually going to do a deal with Habitat for the townhomes.
Hmm.
It's Habitat for Humanity's got a new program here. It's a median income program where you're 80% of median income instead of 60.
Okay.
And so we're going to build 1,000 square foot, 800 to 1,000 square foot, 2-story townhomes
Yeah.
in a cottage looking arrangement.
Interesting.
Very, very modern looking, modern looking buildings, because the strip center is very square. It's very linear and
Right.
square. It's just, and so it's going to have a look like that. And they're going to be owners, and you won't be able to own over one unit out there. It'll be a condo association. They won't be platted. They'll be condoed. And I call them my guards,
Mm.
because as the shopping center may change hands, if I sell the shopping center one day, they'll be, and I sell it to a person that's not very good. You've got owners here now calling the city and talking. So I call them the guards forever. And so, and then they're also getting the benefit of a condo association keeping up their properties. Because a lot of the habitats problems is people get these properties and they don't know how to keep them up. They've never owned anything
Yeah.
before. So I think, and then one last thing I tell you this: by building these townhomes in the parking lot, it's not a great money maker here. It'll make a little bit of money because the land's free, but it's still a lot of infrastructure cost. It's still $600,000 worth of infrastructure costs for 16 townhomes, which is light, at least for us and what we're used to. But if it raises the rents on the shopping center by having a mixed use community, walkable community, by $2 a foot over the next 5 years, that's 90,000 square feet times $2. That's 180,000 a year to the bottom line. If you put an 8% cap rate on that, that's like over $2.5 million in value to the property. So my point in saying that is, some things don't actually look like they make a lot of money, but they make it in a different way.
Yeah. If you think about that $600,000 infrastructure investment, that's, 4 times, a return on that for,
yes,
the rent.
it'll pay for it. And especially if I get Habitat to do it, then I don't have to finance it. And I get to control the design stuff. And I love the idea of Habitat type occupants mixed with, because that's the market here.
Yeah.
That's the market where I live. So it's, and I love the idea of making that, making that work like that. I love we're close to finalizing our deal right now. Jim Kuman, as you know, and has helped me. He's got the patience to put together a bureaucratic deal like that with Habitat, but he's helping me with the plan and that work on this one. So it's pretty cool. So the point is, in all of this, is there's a huge amount of opportunities if you look, and you don't have to really look too far. It's like rebuilding community. That's all it is.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we'll get some people contact me after hearing this or down the line and tell me stories about the so-called obsolete properties that they have done something cool with. I'd love to hear about that. Monty, it's been great talking to you. When am I going to see you again in person?
Are you going to CNU?
Probably not this year.
Yeah. You're not going to go? Oh,
nah.
man.
I know.
I don't know when I'm going to be back to Kansas City. Hopefully soon. I don't have a date yet, but hopefully probably by this summer. I'll be up in the summer.
Okay.
Look at
Well,
the golf
just let
course.
me know.
I will.
Let me know. We'll get some barbecue and maybe I'll come out to Grandview and look at the golf course with you.
Yeah, so that'd be great. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much. I'm glad we're able to catch up again, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay. See you, Kevin.
See you.
Bye.